Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Cinema Wave podcast here at the Culture Wave Media Network. And today we are discussing the next entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It is Captain America: Brave New World. I am one of your hosts. My name is Darian Scalamoni. I am joined this time by Sean Villa.
How we doing, everybody?
And Vinny Albano.
Hello.
So we've been previewing this for a little bit on the channel because we've talked about what happened at Comic-Con and D23 and the previews for this movie. And obviously this was going to be something where it's kind of the same cloth of that we have like the Captain America movies that kind of came before it. But obviously we're going into Anthony Mackie leading and taking on the Shield as the new version of Cap, Sam Wilson, formerly the Falcon, and what was to come with this. Now, the biggest part that a lot of people were anticipating with this movie is that Harrison Ford also joining the MCU, playing the new version of Thunderbolt Ross, since William Hurt had passed away, and the obvious Red Hulk marketing that we got throughout all of the previews for this movie. But the first thing we're going to talk about is just kind of our overall broad thoughts on how we felt about the movie, and then we want to get into a lot of the hubbub that's been going on online about a lot of stuff with this movie. So, Sean, let's just start with you. Overall broad thoughts on Captain America: Brave New World, which we saw together.
Yeah, we did. We saw it together.
Nice little date. Nice little friend date.
It was a lovely date. We had a great time. Scal bought me popcorn. No. I'm such a sucker for Captain America in the same way that I'm a sucker for Spider-Man and Batman, where basically anything that they're in a theater, I have to go to. It's just this compulsion I have. Disney owns me. I crawl my way to the theater to go see Captain America. So I even watched Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which we had talked a little bit about off the pod, that I'm not a huge fan of, but it has nothing to do with Anthony Mackie, and it has nothing to do with the character. I think Anthony Mackie is a very talented actor. I think Falcon, or now Captain America, is a likable guy, is a likable character, Sam Wilson. And when I went to this movie, I was really just hoping that this was an opportunity for them to give Anthony Mackie a real leading role. I know he led the show, but he kind of co-led it with Bucky, the Winter Soldier, the other half of the title. And this movie was supposed to be all about him. And I think my biggest issue with this movie is that I don't think that this was I don't want to say career maker, because Anthony Mackie's been going with the MCU for probably 10 years now, if not longer. But I wanted this to kind of make him like an A-lister for the MCU, just for the Marvel universe. I wanted him to kind of stand up there with the old Captain America, who was sort of like the first guy you saw on the Marvel opening logo. And I don't think this movie really accomplished that for me. I don't feel like his character got to a place at the end of this movie that almost justified giving him a movie. I don't think he has much of an arc at all in this. It sort of just seems like a random sideshow adventure for him. And it's also not a movie that's really about Captain America, which I would have more of an issue with inherently if it weren't for Civil War, which is a movie that also is kind of not about Captain America. It's more about the Winter Soldier again and his relationship to Iron Man. But yeah, if we're talking about did I enjoy the movie, kinda. Not really, a little bit is sort of my general answer to that. I wanted more for this character, though. I think that ultimately the movie failed me in a way that's not on a scene-by-scene basis of did I enjoy the movie. It was really that I wanted more for a Captain America movie, because I have such an attachment to the character and the idea of Captain America that I don't think was fulfilled.
I think that's fair. Vinny?
Oh, I'm gonna cut to the chase. I hated this movie.
Bam.
I had the low expectations, and then the second trailer dropped. My expectations got a little higher.
It is a cool trailer.
It is. But this film, not only it didn't even succeed the low tier expectations that I already put on it. It was worse than what I was expecting. I genuinely think this movie is utter Disney slop. And I have a variety of reasons. I came out of the theater, I was ranting. I actually brought a friend and we saw it on Friday, and he turned to me after the film was done and he said, "Don't ever take me to a movie this dog shit ever again." And I couldn't help but resonate with his words, because I felt the same way, and I totally agreed. Because I just went into my notes app and I ranted, and this film has exposition problems. It has things clearly cut. It has these terrible visuals at points. It has, like you said, Sean, a character who has no arc, has no real story in this at all. And I could just go on, but for my broad thoughts, I was not a fan of this. I actually think this is probably one of my least favorite MCU films. And I know it's harsh, but I'm just being real, honestly.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think that I don't think it's the worst movie I've ever seen. I don't think it's horrible. I think I've seen worse things in the MCU personally. I don't know. I know you're not completely caught up with all Marvel things.
No, so I'm not. And you know what? I thought that this movie was supposed to be like Marvel's going back to its like
roots.
Yeah, to its roots and to its like quiet, like grounded little stories. And I didn't get that at all. I'm not acquainted with modern MCU, as you know, because there was multiple times in the theater that I turned to Scal and was like, hey, is this a new character for this movie, or am I supposed to know like who the hell this is?
The Eternal was a big thing for you, the Celestial, right, because it's a plot thread that's been left in the air since 2021, I think, maybe Eternals came out, maybe even before that. But that was something that people were like, wait a minute, there's a giant Celestial sticking out of the world, and it hasn't been touched on, and now they're like, oh, it's for adamantium, and then it's not really talked about again, which is another plot issue. I agree with what you're saying. I agree with what both of you are saying. First of all, Anthony Mackie, I think, unfortunately, because of a few different instances in his career, has been viewed as like somebody that like is not. And part of it really has nothing to do with talent. It's just like, I think part of it is that he's very much a normal guy. He's not a Hollywood guy.
Right.
And he can be brash and he can be honest and he speaks his truth. And people don't like that about him, and which I think is unfortunate. I think his work that he's done in his career and in the MCU has been really well done. I am a fan of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but I can acknowledge the problems that exist within that story. I do like getting to know a little bit more about Sam and where he came from, and what came out of that. But interestingly enough, it's like but I agree with what you're saying. It's like it kind of feels like Adventure of the Week for him, which you need to kind of build off of where we end up at the end of Falcon and Winter Soldier, because they're handing literally the mantle over to him, and it's like this is a really big deal. Like Cap is a very instrumental character going forward, and especially when like I mean it's literally referenced in this as one of the major, I guess, MCU connected points when Ross is like, I want to rebuild the Avengers. And like he wants him to lead this mission. And you don't really feel like he's capable of doing it based on what we see. You know what I mean? Like, that's one part of it. Obviously, the editing, which we'll get into, is very sloppy. The writing, to me, stuck out even more than the editing. You're obviously the screenwriter in the room, but like so much of it was just scenes that felt like even the old Marvel humor, like none of it worked. Right. And Danny Ramirez, who I like in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, was really bad in this movie. And I think that, and there were other actors as well.
I'm cringing thinking about it. I am.
Yeah, it's rough. But I also think, and I feel bad saying this, I never like to, there's a lot of directorial problems with this movie. And I think I mentioned this to you when we walked out, but I was like, Julius Ona hadn't done anything bigger. And, you know, in the past, sometimes that's worked with Marvel, right? Like they've been like, let's bring in a James Gunn and let's give him something bigger. Let's bring in the Russos, who are best known for directing Arrested Development, and give them Captain America Winter Soldier. And it turns out amazing. This did not work directorially. There were so many instances where I'm like, is that a bad line delivery because the script is awful, or is it bad line delivery because they weren't directed properly? So there were so many structural issues that I had with this, but I've seen worse in the MCU as well. Like the Marvels, to me, is one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my entire life. Like that's something that I can't recommend over this, because there are elements of this movie where I'm like, here's an idea that is an incomplete idea, but if they can wrap it up, it could actually be something interesting. And instead they just go, let's go over here.
That's a great point to bring up, is that I think that there are plenty of instances in this movie where I went, oh, that's like a cool nugget of an idea. Like this could blossom into something interesting, but I think you're right. Like it's bogged down by this writing that mixes with this editing where it sort of just makes this like, all right, ready, Scal? We're going to have a conversation like we are in Captain America Brave New World, right? This is how the scenes start in this movie. I walk in, I sit down and go, gee, Scal, this is an important podcast here at Culture Wave Media. I really hope that this video blows up and gets hundreds of views because I'll feel good about myself if that happens. Where it's like, nobody talks like that.
Yes.
Nobody speaks like that. And every scene doesn't need to start with a character kind of explaining like their entire motivation and what everything they're talking about means to them and to the world.
It's like
large.
too much exposition.
Yeah, it's very exposition-y. It's very like, oh shit, like we need to rewrite this movie really fast. And I don't really know like a subtle way to introduce this plot thread, so I'm just going to have Harrison Ford just say it to his secretary. It's like, all right, like one time you can do that. You can get away with that one time, and I'm still going to roll my eyes, but I'll be like, all right. It's like the whole movie.
It is. And that's why I felt like it was beating me over the head with it. Somebody made this analogy on a different podcast that I was listening to. So I'm going to give the shout out to the person because I don't want to make it my idea, but it perfectly embodies exactly how I felt now after sitting on this movie for a few days. It's Wednesday Night Marshall, Christian Harloff show. And he said, you ever like use a pencil and you're writing things down and then you erase really hard, but the remnants of the word are still there and it's confusing you on like what is actually written out? That is what this fucking movie is. Like they literally go back to one idea that exists, and we'll get into the production problems because I think that has such a major impact on why this movie is so mid shit, however you want to reference it. But like it gets to points where it's like it seems like they were going to go in one direction with this character, and then the test screening didn't go well. So they said, we need to cut this character out and we need to introduce another character that has a cool look. And guess what? It's a really cool actor that was in Breaking Bad. So let's shoehorn them in too. And it didn't work. It didn't like feel structurally connected the way that former MCU projects pre-Avengers Endgame felt. And that is my biggest criticism coming out of this movie, because I'm like, regardless, like Guardians of the Galaxy 3, did you see Guardians 3? You did, right?
I did.
Guardians to me is a great movie, and it doesn't necessarily lead us into any connective anything going forward because it doesn't need to, because it's a great movie, and it doesn't matter about that if you have a great MCU movie. You can have an MCU movie that's like a 7.5 and 8, but if they find a really interesting way to introduce us to something else in the lore of the comic book nature of it, then you're like, that was a really cool moment. Now let's talk about it. There's a lot to talk about with that. Where can they go from here? Where can they go from there? There's none of that in this movie. And it basically leaves you feeling so empty afterwards that you're like, did I just waste like an hour and 58 minutes, like not knowing where I'm going next, not only with these characters, but in the larger scale of what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I piggyback off of both of what you guys are saying. First things first, the exposition, like, so like you put it perfectly, Sean. You both of you put it perfectly. It's just like mumbo jumbo is coming out of these characters' mouths. The perfect example is when the main villain of the film is introduced, and I'm just like, what? What?
Yeah,
What is he saying?
I'm the main villain.
Yeah, and he's like, and this is my motivation, and I'm going here, and I'm doing this, and
It's like Looney Tunes.
yeah, and it's absurd, and that's like every character, and none of the information in this film I'm absorbing efficiently because I don't like they're speaking to me like throwing paragraphs at me, and I'm like, you could have done. I don't know, you could have shown us a flashback or any type of creative form of visual storytelling for my brain to be like, okay, I get it now. And also for it to be a lot more intriguing and not being so bogged down. And then on top of that, and you guys covered it with the writing, but so much like important events happen in this film. And then are like they feel like they're just like immediately forgotten about, and just it feels like thing happens, and then another thing happens, and then another thing happens, and like even I wrote here, there's no consequences or aftermaths to scenes that are actually crazy within the continuity, and I listed the Cap versus Sidewinder fight as an example because it's like actually insane, like the town blows up. Or not the whole town, but they're in a town. The car blows up. Police are killed. Like property damage, and then it's just like, all right, that never happens. That never happens. Like, no one brings it up. He's like, oh yeah, I got hurt.
Right.
Also knifed right to the fucking heart, and he has no super soldier serum.
I think he actually said like, I've got a Kevlar shirt on or something. Like he has like some dumb line. I swear that's really in there. There's definitely a line afterward where he like has like the little patch on or whatever, so we can see that Anthony Mackie's ripped. He's like shirtless in a scene, and then someone is like, it's probably the Vulture, this new guy. And he's like, damn, Cap, like you look pretty good for like getting stabbed or whatever. And he was like, yep, that's the joy of Kevlar or whatever. Like he has some stupid line in there where it's like, why are we wearing Kevlar driving through like a mountain town? What are you talking about?
I thought, and if it's the same scene, like, and again, a little thing, but something continuity, it just seems weird. Like when he's like, we're going right. He's like, we're going, like we're leaving, and he goes right now, and he goes right now. So like pack your shit or whatever. And then he just gets up. He has everything packed and he runs out with him. I'm like, it doesn't even make sense with the dialogue. Like you're saying you're surprised that you're about to leave and you need to be immediate in your actions, and you already have a bag packed that you knew you were doing.
You don't have a pregnancy go bag, like just in case at any given moment, in case there's a terrorist attack and you've got to just like go and stop and save the day.
It's fucking crazy though. It's just like the way that they handle scene by scene, like you were just saying, Vinny, like it really feels like a boomerang effect, like the whole entire time. And I know like there were multiple times in the theater, Sean, that you were laughing because you're like, I don't even understand how they edited this. Like, how did they?
It's so crazy.
Terrible.
It is a crazy editing job. Like, listen, I can forgive a lot with this movie. I don't feel as harshly as you do, Vinny.
I'm not as harsh on it, but I get it.
I generally am like, this movie is what I'd call aggressively fine. Like, it's just doesn't excel at anything. It's like across the board kind of fine. The editing is nuts. I don't know what the hell happened there. It kind of feels like they had like a runtime pressure situation.
Probably.
Where it's like, oh, this movie's like 2 hours. Like, it needs to be... like, they edited like a 3-hour cut of this movie. And then they cut 97 scenes. And then it still was like 10 minutes over. So they took just like 2 seconds off of every line of dialogue. Like, right at the end when they stopped speaking. It's just like, hey, Joe, how's it going? Great. It's going great today. Oh, okay, that's good. Like, it's like, whoa, dude, slow down. It's like, this is not like, you're not Succession. Relax.
Yeah, there's no room for the characters to actually have emotions in this movie.
No,
like,
there's no breath at all.
Yeah.
It's just constant.
And what is made, it's a political thriller, right? And it's trying to capture the same vibe and energy of Winter Soldier. Suspense is made within the edit, right? There's nothing, scenes that literally felt like there needed to be suspense. There's nothing. There's no build up. There's just none of that. It's like that's what offended me so much, is like, I know you said like it's painfully fine, but that's what makes me hate this movie so much more, because it's like I would have took something that was just
really, really awful.
Yeah, really awful, and maybe had like a so fun it's bad or so bad it's fun type of film, rather than something like this, right? And yeah, like even in the action, honestly, I felt so, and this might have been a directorial thing, because the Russos, they directed their action, and the Winter Soldier, it's gritty, it's heavy, it's a lot of handheld, it's shaky, but in the edit, in the way they've decided to shoot the action, it feels weightless. There was literally, I noticed disconnected punches. Like, Cap's shield didn't feel heavy, like I in Winter Soldier. And now it might have been the sound mixing in my theater, but it literally sounded like this film was missing sound design.
No, I felt that way too. The sound of this movie was weird. Like, it's also like, I don't know, connecting it to Winter Soldier also, because I agree with what you're saying in terms of like they were trying to make their own kind of version of that. But you brought up in the very beginning something that I think also needs to be talked about, because this is not a Captain America movie. It's an Incredible Hulk sequel, which is also insane, because you're referencing something of a character that we haven't. The last time we saw this character, he was involved in one of the worst things in recent memory that Marvel did with She-Hulk, and like it's also not like the movie was almost 20 years ago. The Incredible Hulk, like we're seeing Betty Ross again, like. What is like?
That's Liv Tyler.
Yeah, like what is that? Like obviously, The leader, I know they changed the design of the leader too. The leader looked bad. Like he did not look good. The design was awful.
Yeah, he just had lasagna for a head.
Yeah, literally. And so I don't know if you guys had seen some of the stuff that I referenced, or I sent the articles. I know we were talking, but like a lot of characters along the way changed. Like designs changed. They changed scenes. They were going to do the Serpent Society led by Razorback, who was going to be played by Rosa Salazar, best known for Alita Battle Angel.
Mm-hmm.
Every single thing with that character was cut.
Huh.
Everything. And then they brought in Sidewinder, which was Giancarlo Esposito, who was a military militia Marvel dude, and it just didn't work. Like there was like nothing. And he's a great actor. Like Giancarlo Esposito is an incredible actor. Even his stuff didn't feel like emotionally heavier than anything else.
No, it felt like they were like, wow, Giancarlo Esposito would really look good in this trailer. And they gave him 2 scenes in the movie where he doesn't do anything. And then they were like, nice, that'll pull some people in.
Well, that was the Red Hulk.
Got me.
That was the Red Hulk thing too, though.
Right.
So the Red Hulk, for obviously, we've been talking spoilers the whole time. So whatever, spoiler alert again. But the Red Hulk is in one scene, and it is the scene that we have seen through every single marketing campaign. Almost every single shot that we have seen of the Red Hulk, we see in this movie. There's almost nothing extra.
He's in the trailers. He's a significant part of the trailers. We see half of his entire runtime in the trailers. He's on the poster. The whole film, I'm waiting for the Red Hulk because that's what they promised us. That's what they promised us. I Red Hulk. I thought it would be like, you know, the crossing the threshold, like the end of the break into 2, right? That moment. Oh my God, he's the Red Hulk. Okay. No Red Hulk. Midpoint. No Red Hulk. It's the twist. It's the final, like, climactic twist is he's the Red Hulk, which we already know. And I had the whole marketing was this. I thought the Red Hulk was going to be the main villain, not some loser. Like, he's he's a loser. Okay, I think the Thinker comic book was such an interesting character. In this, he's in a hoodie. He has, like you mentioned, lasagna for a head.
He's like a tech bro. He's like Elon Musk with lasagna as a head.
Yeah.
Purple lasagna Elon Musk head.
And by the way, I don't know how that works. That design, I would have just liked the big head because the whole brain outside of the skull makes no sense. How does the brain go outside? Anyhow, whatever. He's a loser. He just acts all edgy in his hoodie. And I'm going to kill a random guy that has no significance to the plot. I'm going to kill another random guy that has no significance to the plot who we haven't even seen. And then it
was also convenient, though. The second guy, the military guy, he's like, I got to make a call. And he walks up the hill and he's just there. He's just waiting there for him. Like, what the fuck?
Right outside the military outpost.
Yes.
You know, which is never guarded, or there's no fences or anything that would stop this completely average guy with a glowing green head from just kind of wandering inside in a hoodie and being stopped by the U.S. military. No way.
Can we, now that you bring that up, can we also mention the fact that he just walked out of that prison? He could have done that before. He had the power to you know, hypnotic... you put everyone under his spell, quote unquote, in that prison. Why did he have to wait for Cap to get there and be like, all right, I'm just gonna walk out of here now?
Vinny, I'll raise you one better. I didn't even think about this, and I feel dumb for not thinking about this. Why didn't he do that to Captain America? Was there a plot reason given to why he didn't hypnotize Cap?
I don't think so.
Because he doesn't have a super soldier serum. He's like in direct opposition to him for the entire movie. That's like a perfect spy. You know, all right.
Yeah.
I guess, you know, we can rave and ramble about how many things in this movie don't work, which is a lot of things. I feel like almost every department of this movie has some kind of significant flaw that just bogs it down. But now, when I went into it, I didn't know that there was like these major production issues. Since you told me about it and have been thoughtful enough to send articles, thank you. I've done some research into it, and I think that this kind of explains the movie that we have. It makes it a lot less of a mystery of like what the hell is going on, and more of a sort of sequence of events that we can follow to the product that we got. So I'm curious as to what you guys think about these like behind the scenes distractions and plot mix-ups and additional scenes, and just sort of let's talk about like what all that was.
Yeah, so I want to address the Harrison Ford one first because it's interesting. Because there was another article that came out after the fact where they were like, it's only all the production problems have been talked about by multiple crew members since the movie was made, but the Harrison Ford thing, other people have denied. However, like is it not that out of the question to think that an 80-year-old Harrison Ford who's been in multiple plane crashes who's already a cranky enough person, like I think that's known in the public forum, that he didn't enjoy the process of motion capture? Yeah. It's not that surprising. You know what I mean? Like that could also be a Red Hulk thing. But then I'm also thinking to myself too, and I don't know, again, if this is like a Julius Ona thing. I don't know if this is a Marvel thing. But like think about something like as simple as like Groot, right? Groot is not played by Vin Diesel on the set. It's played by Sean Gunn. And Sean Gunn also does the motion capture for Rocket Raccoon. It's not Bradley Cooper there doing it. And this is an 80-year-old man. Like, why do we need him to do it? Like, I understand in terms of, again, with the facial stuff, like, because they want it to be, and I think his look is cool. I think that in terms of, I agree in terms of like the stakes of the fights, but I think the CG in the fights, at least I was worried about, like, I don't think the CG looks bad, which is a first in recent memory for Marvel. Like a lot of the CG, there was massive problems. Like Thor: Love and Thunder, I think about like
the floating head.
Yeah, like that's insane. Like the fact that made a final cut of a movie is crazy. So I think the CG is fine, but hearing about how the production was a mess, it just makes me think that they were so ill prepared for what this movie was going to be. And I'm like you said, Sean, I think that it does answer the questions of like they obviously had so much pressure from Disney or Marvel or Feige in particular that it wasn't working. Like whatever they had previously wasn't working. But then it's like, well, then what did they add? Like the only thing that I'm aware that they added was Giancarlo Esposito. Like I don't know what else was not in that initial body of that script. Why did they change the design of the leader? They didn't need to do that. Like, what did people not like the way that he looked? It was comic accurate. Like, what? You know what I mean? Like, that's things that are confusing to me.
I think, you know, the more that we talk about it, the more I'm going to hold to my point that I agree with you that I don't think that this is like the worst Marvel movie ever made. But I do think that this movie kind of seems the least polished Marvel movie that I think I've ever seen. And that doesn't mean that it's like the quality of it goes straight down the toilet. It just means that like even a shitty movie that comes out in the MCU that I could watch and go, this has fundamental flaws that I really dislike. This movie feels less complete than that one. It feels like the people on the set were just kind of like fumbling around more and that there was more corporate intervention with it. The whole thing just kind of feels messy, as we've just sort of been expressing. It just feels like something really went wrong. Now, if you guys will allow me for a second, I'm going to craft the Sean theory.
Go for it.
This is a Sean theory about what happened with this movie. Because I was trying to figure out, like, how do we get from, like, a movie that's probably, like, complete and coherent, it goes to test screenings, they don't like it, and then we wind up with this. I think, and maybe I'm giving them too much credit, I think that what may have happened with the time frame of this movie, and from what I've read from some of those articles and, like, crew interviews, that this was going to be a movie about Anthony Mackie protecting Harrison Ford from an assassination attempt from, like, this outside terrorist group. That's what I think this movie was. And I think it was going to be like this tense thriller of him trying to protect this guy and like prove himself in that way as this outside threat is like constantly encroaching. Now that could have been the Master. That could have been this this terrorist group that I keep forgetting the name of. That
Serpent Society.
Serpent Society that Giancarlo represents. But I think that due to events that occurred, the movie was pushed back. It was, you know, kind of like all reworked. And it became a movie has that in the start. That's where this theory comes from. It has like an assassination attempt in there, but then it becomes a movie that's also trying to be like, oh, well, actually, like ties into the Hulk and the adamantium's here. Now, all those seeds I would bet were there in the beginning, but they take up so much time in this script now. When I think they were supposed to be like one line. I think it was supposed to be like one line of dialogue. We throw in like a little hint about the adamantium and one little thing about whatever, the Hulk. And then I think it blossomed into this thing where like we can't make the movie that we want to anymore, so we're going to try this, and it didn't work. And then we're going to, all right, we'll add this, and it doesn't really work. And then we're going to add this and this and this and this. And they just kept throwing 1,000 little things. So we have this amalgam of a movie that's not really anything. And then, I don't know. That's my crazy theory of what happened.
I see it. Thanks,
yeah. I second that, by the way. I also do see it. But
yeah, it really will remain a mystery to us, you know. unless we I don't know, maybe Julius Ohan will open up, but yeah, it's just so interesting, honestly. I don't have much to add particularly to that, but I do agree with you. Like, I think that is a very valid theory for what has come to be of this film.
I feel like that would have been something that Harrison Ford would have signed on for too. I think it's a compelling, and it also aligns with all of like what he's done in the past, like the movies that he's done in the past, like those conspiracy threat. Like, I think that's what drew so many people to Winter Soldier in general too. Like, I mean, think about even the parallel in that, right? Like, Winter Soldier has Robert Redford, who was not even doing that much at the time, and he's amazing as Alexander Pierce. And then you have Harrison Ford, you bring in, who's like essentially same level in terms of Robert Redford, maybe in terms of star power, right? But I think that's I mean, I definitely can see that being a theory. Like, it was a tense time. It's been a tense time in the country, and I think that it, with, like you said, circumstances and what happened, it would be obvious that they've wanted to pivot. And I wonder if part of your theory is based on maybe what I told you last week with Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Because remember what happened there? We talked about the They were but that was which poor Captain America storylines, man. Like, they can't catch a break. But Falcon and Winter Soldier initially was supposed to have that villain group distribute a virus to the world.
Right.
And it was during COVID, so they went back and reshot like half the show. So also poor Anthony Mackie, that he's going through like all these issues when he should be the one that should be like reveling in the success of what this character means to him and going forward with Cap.
Yeah, I mean, that's my ultra specific like theory crafting idea there, but I ultimately do kind of think that there's like almost proof in the pudding that something substantial happened to this production where they had to pivot into this like radically different direction. That's what I think it was. It could have been anything though. And I think that really just goes to show that like this movie had such like a crazy jumping off point for an MCU project. Like, I haven't heard about any of these movies going anything other than swimmingly almost the entire way up to where we are now. And maybe I'm wrong. I mean, maybe you guys are more educated on like the MCU behind the scenes than I am. But this is the first one that I've seen where I've been like, yeah, like this had like a crazy production, I think, and then was correct. I don't know. Is there like evidence that this has happened to other MCU movies that have kind of like recovered more off the top of your head?
I'm aware of it, but is there any that you're aware of that you?
Well, I know Eternals had issues, right? Like a lot of Eternals got cut.
I don't remember if it got. Well, I mean, it's a 3-hour movie. If anything got cut, I'd be shocked.
Yeah.
But I mean, the reception was bad for that movie. The Marvels was a big one. The Marvels, though, and neither of you guys have seen it, right?
I have not seen the Marvels.
Nope.
Movie's not good. But there's like a whole sequence where they go to like a planet where everybody that's on the planet, instead of speaking, they do it in song.
Oh boy.
It's like a giant musical sequence. And I heard that tested very poorly. And so they cut it to like essentially like one small number. And there's also things in that movie where it can feel disjointed. And ironically, again, enough, it feels like the only redeeming thing about that movie was the performances. Was like the 3 leads. And again, we're talking about talented actors, obviously, and they know the character so well because they've been playing them. They signed on to do these things, to play these characters, where I think that's what like is helping me also not shit on this movie entirely, because like you can see that Anthony Mackie wants to do something with this character. He cares about the character. I think Harrison Ford, and even like in terms of his promoting of the movie, like he's been more of like, I'm excited to talk about this. Like the Red Hulk thing is like something like, I remember when he came out on the Comic-Con stage, people freaked out and he like jokingly did like the Hulk thing. It's like, you haven't seen that from Harrison Ford in marketing ever. But meanwhile, like there's other, like Danny Ramirez, we already kind of touched on a little bit, but like he's fine in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I think he's good in Top Gun Maverick. I think he has talent as an actor, but this wasn't good for him. Then you think about, again, Giancarlo Esposito. He gets relegated to this side character that is a nothing character. And you don't feel that within the other Cap movies. You don't feel that within a lot of the other Marvel movies necessarily. But again, post Endgame, like, yeah, there's like, it feels like Quantumania to me a little bit too. You saw Quantumania?
Yeah, and I get the same vibes actually. That's what I thought of when I came out of it and I said, like, this might be one of my least favorite MCU films, I thought of the feeling that Quantumania gave me.
Yeah, and it's weird, though, because there's aspects of Quantumania... Well, actually, it's not that weird because it's the same thing. There's aspects of Quantumania that work really well. There's other aspects of Quantumania that are really, really bad. And, like, I know, like, the same way I feel about kind of Danny Ramirez's character in this, not as bad, but, like, Bill Murray. Did you see Quantumania?
Yeah, I did see Quantumania.
Bill Murray in that movie is terrible to me. Like, Krylar as a character is one of the worst written characters in the history of the MCU. And I just wish he didn't exist. I wish we never got that. And you're wasting Bill Murray. You're wasting Michelle Pfeiffer. You're wasting Michael Douglas. And it's like, why are we doing this? Like, how are we getting to this point? So, I mean, I'm talking myself into disliking this movie more and more.
The more that we talk about it, the more I kind of fall down this hole. But I think it's so, like, fascinating to me, too. And I think that's another point where this comes from. I definitely have a couple subjective reasons that I don't hate this movie as much as my logical side is telling me that I should. One of those is that I just, I haven't been to an MCU movie in a long time since Guardians 3. I kind of fell off that train. Like I said, I love Captain America. And then the other part of it is that, like, as you mentioned, I'm a writer. And then when I see a movie like this, and then now we talk about like Quantumania and these other movies that are having these problems, it's such a foreign thing to me because what I think is happening with these like Disney properties is that they're making the movies and then being like, oh, let's go back and like do rewrites that are so substantial that I wonder like, how did you start production where you did? Like it feels like rushed. And like I'm just thinking back to like my thesis classes where like I would write a screenplay and you'd have one draft. They'd be like, there's a major problem here in Act 2. You got to go back and like change a lot of stuff. I change 60 pages and come back, and then you have to do it 9 more times, and then you have a screenplay. It feels like they get to that first draft, and they're like, okay, there's a touch up here. Now you have the second draft, and they're like, all right, start shooting. We'll figure it out. And it's just like, that's crazy to me. Like doing a reshoot of a movie that costs $100 million is nuts. Like we've reached a point now in filmmaking and with Disney and with this, just conglomerate of the evil corporation that can make $1 billion movie and just kind of like rub it off, that we're getting like productions that I've never seen before. Like something like this couldn't have happened until recently, I think. Like it's such a strange disaster that's like not a disaster because of who's making it.
Yeah.
And to me, that's like almost more interesting than anything that this movie does on a narrative level.
I think it's happening more often than you think. I just think that it's always been more under wraps too. Like I think there's more. Again, it's like information overload. Like we have too much info. The fact that we already know specific aspects of the production that were, like, we shouldn't have even known that they did basically do $100 million worth of reshoots.
Well, that's another part of kind of what I'm saying is that like it's not a disaster. Like that's what's really like fascinating to me. It's like does horrible shit happen on productions like all the time? Of course. Like do people waste millions and millions of dollars and throw away half a movie? Yes. But like not as like blatantly as this and not as like almost like nonchalant as this feels. Like it didn't come out in a way where it was like, man, like this movie like really messed up, man. It's just sort of just like there, and they're like, all right, we'll get that.
I feel like part of it too, and again, this is all assumption based, right? And I don't know if it's a Disney thing or it's a Marvel thing, because Marvel's obviously a major division within Disney, the machine, right? Like think about like just start with the first 2 MCU projects that ever existed, right? Iron Man. You had Jon Favreau coming off his biggest failure of a movie, which was Zathura. This like huge sci-fi movie that was supposed to be major. It was not major, didn't do well, got critically panned. Then you had Robert Downey Jr. coming off of like arrests and being in jail and being a drug addict. And he was going to lead this movie when their initial choice was Tom Cruise, which is nuts. Like that's a crazy like opposite. And they were basically rewriting the movie every day. I don't know if you knew that or not, but like literally every day they were rewriting things. They were shaping the character around how RDJ felt, and that was like kind of so much of the nucleus of that movie. And I think it was Jeff Bridges that like lovingly was like, I hated that process because like as an actor who's more classically trained, he was like, this is not working for me. Like I can't do this. And Incredible Hulk, another situation, which again, ironically enough, this is a sequel to. You have Edward Norton's version of the Hulk. Edward Norton disagrees creatively what you want to do with the character because he was an executive producer on the first movie. They lose him and they go, that's fine. We'll just figure it out. And they did. They got Mark Ruffalo and it worked out, and he's been there ever since. I think Marvel believes that they have the ability to put out these fires in a way that like, well, we're above everything else, so we'll figure it out and the fans will still like it. And that's where it's turning. The tide is turning because I think that fans don't want to put up with that. Like, even Vinny and I, like, because you said the last one you saw was Guardians. Like, Deadpool and Wolverine is a great example of like taking everything that a fan would be excited about and throwing it in a movie and being like, I'm here for this. And it has the same thing as like the No Way Home effect. Like, No Way Home, the more I watch it, though I appreciate what they were going for, it's not a movie. It's like a nostalgia trip where you're getting these like member berries where you're like, oh, okay, this is cool. Like, I like that, like, they have a scene together. And Deadpool and Wolverine, same thing. Like, I don't want to spoil the movie for you, so I won't.
I've seen Deadpool and Wolverine.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, you were saying the last one you saw was Guardians. That's why I was in between.
True. I lied. Sorry, audience.
But like throwing Blade and even like Channing Tatum's Gambit, which like you wouldn't know unless you were such a massive fan of Marvel movies, like it wouldn't hit as strong if they weren't so reliant on like the fan reaction of these things. But now you have fans coming out and being like, this is not the conspiracy thriller that I've seen the last two movies. Like, even Civil War, despite it not being a Captain America movie, so much of the center of that story is actually the disagreement between Captain America and Iron Man.
Right.
Like, that's massive. Like, they were able to build it around that and his relationship with Bucky that kind of completes that trilogy. Like, you see from where he started with being Bucky's best friend to Bucky being the villain to Bucky being his ally.
Right.
Like, there's just so much with it. But I just ranted for a while. I apologize.
Yeah.
You're good.
And I'm going to say two things. One thing before I make my big point. Real quick, just because it popped in my mind. The humor, what was even the joke about the airdropped photo? Do you remember that?
Yes.
He goes, I'm going to airdrop it to you. This is not the photo you took. Oh, sorry. I sent you the wrong photo. What does that mean? What?
It's a nothing line.
Yeah. What? I don't understand. Are we supposed to be laughing? Because I'm not laughing.
They were on set and they were like, we need to plug in a joke here. Just like
Yeah.
say something funny and then we'll figure it out in ADR. And then they just forgot to do it.
Yeah, and yeah. Anyhow, the main point I was gonna say was piggybacking off of what you guys were saying, and you mentioned thesis and you mentioned the political state of I sound like Jaden Smith. The political state of America at the current moment, and we had a attempted assassination attempt on our president at the current moment, and yada yada. That possibly changed their direction with the film. I am leaning towards the idea that it most likely changed the direction towards this film. But that's why I call this film utter Disney slop. Because Disney is this big old conglomerate who wants to please everyone. And you're making a political thriller, and yet you have, and this is why this statement might be controversial, but you don't have the balls to take a stance. So you are just like, yeah, let's make in the realm of a political thriller, but not really stand on anything and just kind of like just try to please everyone with this like content vomit almost of a film.
I get what you're saying, and this is like a drastic shift in quality. I don't think it's this bad, but it actually, what you're talking about kind of reminds me of, you remember that Pepsi ad at the protests?
Oh, with Kylie Jenner?
Yes. So
yeah.
Kylie Jenner Pepsi ad. So that, I feel like, kind of did this thing where it used like a protest as a backdrop to sell you something.
Yeah.
I think this is doing a similar thing where it's like, we're going to use like American politics as a backdrop for a story. But in both situations, they're not actually saying anything about the setting that they've presented. They're just kind of using it as like a setting as you would like a war zone or a jungle or, you know, like anywhere. And it's something that's so inherently not just that you kind of need to say something with the setting that you're provided. And they're just not doing it because of that Disney thing. I completely agree with you.
Yeah. I don't know where else to go from here. I mean, we haven't talked about a lot of positives. I'll give my most positive thing on the movie. Besides Anthony, I think that I really like Carl Lumbly as an actor. I like having Isaiah Bradley as a character going forward and having this sort of mentor, like a rightful mentor to Sam, because obviously like Steve isn't around. You don't know who else he would really connect with on a level because his connection was so deep with Steve. We do actually get what I think was one of the best scenes in the movie with him and Bucky. And I think that camaraderie between those two characters is another part of the reason I really like Falcon and Winter Soldier. How it's like the odd couple, like with those two. And then you see it. Also crazy though to know that he's a senator now. Like, what is he doing, Bucky?
A
congressman, which is like nuts. But I don't know if that's a comic thing or not. But I thought that scene was great. I think the stuff with Isaiah is really good. But yeah, like even I think your theory has a lot of weight to it. Like the more I'm thinking about it, I'm like, maybe you remember, like, or you were the one who was like, the twist was when, like, what we already saw in all the trailers, like he was going to be the Red Hulk. Maybe initially in the marketing they didn't want to show the Red Hulk at all.
Yeah, and
they had an assassination attempt on Thunderbolt, and I also thought that was ironic because when he comes out in the beginning of the movie and he's introduced as the president, like that's a very new concept of having the glass shields. Like that I thought was interesting, and I noticed that. I was like, that's kind of weird that they have that already. Like they probably shot that before, you know what I mean? But I bet he was probably shot, and they were like, oh my God, like, and it probably looked like it was something that would have killed him. And then they were like, how did you survive this? And it was hidden. Like they were like, it must have been a miracle. And then you start to find out the stuff with the leader and the Gamma, and that is more interesting than what they did. So I think that that's probably where they wound up being. But I think I've talked before we started recording, I told you what my score was going to be. It's probably going to be lower than that. I think I talked myself into a lower score.
I kind of think I did too, man. We did a lot of rambling and raving, and like I don't hate this movie. I don't, and I think a lot of that comes from my subjective attachment to this character, and like the fact that it didn't like completely snooze fest me. But yeah, man, I don't know. We can just get to ratings. I feel like we've talked too much about this movie.
Yeah,
and there's so much to talk about. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I'll start it off. I'm gonna say probably a 4 out of 10. I think is what I'm gonna go to. After we've kind of talked, I was at a 5 because a 5 for me is I don't really hate it. I don't really like it either. It's just kind of there. It exists. I watched it, and now I never want to go back to it. Now I kind of I disliked it a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Vinny, do you have any other thoughts?
I'll say one thing, and it's that I don't mind Anthony Mackie as Cap. I don't think he is as charismatic as Chris Evans as Cap, and we did mention how his character in this film doesn't have an arc, but his character isn't spoiled by the end of the film. He still has potential to have an arc. So I don't mind him as Cap. I actually think he holds the mantle pretty well, and that's probably my biggest positive about the film. Other than that, I am a negative Nancy, and I'm giving this film. I'm giving it a 3 out of 10. Yeah. I was gonna go a little lower maybe, but I'll give it a 3 because there are MCU films that I do deem worse than this, but for me it's pretty bottom tier.
Last thing I want to bring up before I give my score, they do the awful trend post Endgame also of giving us a very either a nothing post credit scene or a post credit scene in which they introduce a character and they're going to be significant later, and then they don't show up again. Again, we're talking spoilers anyway, but this trend of us just saying you're going to have to wait to see what happens when we get to the multiverse is so nauseating. And it's like, at least with Quantumania and a different circumstance, obviously Jonathan Majors is no longer a part of this, but like the movie is fine. I think that movie is better than this movie. Like I have to go back and rewatch. I think I have to go back and rewatch it.
That's crazy.
I have to go back, and I don't like that movie very much. But there's moments of that movie that I think I like a little bit more than this. I think I've talked myself down. I have to rewatch it, to be fair. But at least with the post-credit scene for that, you're like, oh my God, we have the Council of Kangs. Like this is something that they've been building up to, and this is significant for the larger overall story, which that shouldn't contribute to me being like, this movie was good, but it was an aspect that they were like, oh, this was cool, and this is going to build towards something.
What did you want from this post-credit scene?
I kind of wish it didn't have to do with the multiverse at all. Like I would rather stay in like either the world of the the politics of what they're going for, or like, and I know this is very prototypical too, but it's like there's that whole thing of him being like, we're gonna start the Avengers, and him asking Falcon, I don't think is earned. Like I just don't. I don't think Danny Ramirez's character Joaquin Torres laying in a hospital bed, who made a fatal mistake, by the way, made a huge mistake. He goes, we're going to need you on this one, bro. No. How is that your first person you're recruiting? But regardless.
Get that man fired.
Seriously, get that jetpack off him, dude. He doesn't deserve wings. I'm going to go with a 4 out of 10 as well. I think that I initially was way higher than that, a whole 1.5. But I've talked myself down on this movie, and it makes me sad because the other Cap movies, I really like. Civil War and Winter Soldier are 2 of my all-time favorite MCU movies. So, but you know what? It's not Anthony Mackie's fault. So let's not blame Anthony Mackie for this.
I forgot to say my positive, and I agree with Vinny. I think Anthony Mackie is a good actor. Seems like a nice dude. He's, I just wish they gave him some more to do here. That's it. I really feel bad for Anthony Mackie, because I think he has been waiting so long to do this and to lead a movie and to be the captain of the Avengers, right? And they just, again, like they gave him a show that I didn't really care for, but does a lot for his character. And I feel like we started this movie at this jumping off point where he's like, he's one movie away from like, I'm Captain America, baby, and then everyone could get on board. And we're still there after this movie. That kind of blows, I wish that we got more. Ready? I have one final bit to do. The end credit scene. This is how it originally went. They get to the raft, right? That prison where they go to. Harrison Ford is in the cell. He's coughing because he's Red Hulk or whatever. He's off the drugs. He's going through withdrawal. A surgeon walks by, points to another surgeon, goes, "Man, whatever doctor has to deal with that is doomed." Looks right at the camera like this, and then it just holds on them for 5 seconds, and then that's it.
Oh my god, man. That's exactly what this movie feels like. That's literally what this movie feels like. All right, well, we've done enough shitting on Captain America Brave New World, but let us know in the comments, what are your guys' thoughts? Maybe we're completely missing the boat. Maybe there are people out there that really enjoy this movie, and if so, we'd love to know why.
Please let us know.
We'd love to have a conversation with you guys in the comments about it, and if you're on our side too, we'd also love to hear your gripes if you would like to air them out in our comment section. Just be nice. But also give this video a like if you guys can. Subscribe to us here at the Culture Wave Media Network. We're covering tons of things right now. We're covering Severance, the 2nd season on Apple. Boys are covering Invincible season 3 as well right now. We're about to start White Lotus. We have the Monkey review coming soon in terms of movies. So a lot of cool stuff coming for you guys. And if you guys want to follow us on all our social media, all that stuff is below me in the video right now. And also in our YouTube description, you could find all the links to all that stuff. So just signing off, I'm Darian Scalamoni.
I've been Sean Villa.
And I'm Vinny Albano.
And we'll see you guys next time.
This is The Culture.